So for everyone, basically the product which I'm talking about is Adobe Express. So if you guys haven't used Adobe Express, I would urge all of you to use Adobe Express. Adobe Express is the latest offering that Adobe launched in December of 2021. It's an it's a it's a offering which is kind of gives access to customers. It's an all-in video, graphic editing and designing kind of a solution or an offering that Adobe launched. And what I'm going to be talking about is the process that from an FP&A standpoint we followed or we went through while launching this particular product. Uh, hope that kind of resonates with, or hope that kind of helps folks in this group.
Yep. So think
So
about a product where you get very similar to a Canva or a Figma, where you go in and do graphic designing, video editing.
yep,
And Adobe is known for PDF, Acrobat, Photoshop, but this is
yeah,
a newer offering from Adobe. Yeah, I think
yeah,
I think now that
absolutely.
that it's good context for folks to understand.
Great. Thanks, Asif. The second step, or the second role that FP&A plays in the discovery phase is developing the business case. We spoke a lot about that, so hopefully you guys have a good understanding of what that entails. And then the third one is basically assessing the financial viability. And what I mean by financial viability is we spoke about this a little bit while we were talking about the business case. It's very important in the discovery phase itself that the finance function is included into the decision making or the thought process while we are in the discovery phase itself. And the reason I say that is sometimes what happens is the different functions in the different in companies actually come up with ideas or come up with potential solutions that might actually not be financially viable at all, and it could be not financially viable for multiple different set of reasons, right? Maybe uh, you know not always are the different functions. I mean, executives across all functions are always on top of what the financial direction of the company is going to be. But if you're working with somebody in the middle management, let's say across in the marketing organization or in the product organization, they might not be fully in sync with the financial direction that the company wants to go in. And that's why if you're working with somebody in the middle management at that point, it's very important for finance to be included in the early conversations itself, because you can maybe create like a guardrail saying, here is what would make this a financially viable idea, and here is what would not make it a financially viable idea. So that is what I think mostly the first step in the process of creating a new product or launching a new product involves from an FP&A perspective. When we start coming into the development phase, here is where, again, from an FP&A standpoint, also a lot of foundational work starts to happen, right? So you start defining KPIs. KPIs are basically key performance indicators, which are metrics that you feel are critical for assessing the performance of your business. And those metrics don't necessarily have to be financial metrics, right? When I talk about the business, when I talk about the product that we launched into the market right now, I am going to be talking about how, in fact, we spend majority of our time actually talking about non-financial KPIs as our primary KPIs, and you know, and that is also something that FP&A teams are beginning to do quite a bit, which is not just limit themselves to financial KPIs and monitoring them, but also talk about customer KPIs and usage KPIs and so on. The second word that you see there, the North Star metric, I think I just want to highlight that what this means. Every product or every program or every initiative has a bunch of different KPIs that that the FP&A team or the different teams will come up with to try and assess the performance of that program. But what I believe works really well is if every company kind of comes up with a North Star metric. And what I mean by North Star metric is if every other metric doesn't work or doesn't show the outcome that you expected, what is the one metric that is the most critical for your business that you definitely want to be seeing going in the right direction? And that is what we call as a North Star metric. And FP&A kind of can help with this, defining what this North Star KPI is to a great extent, because we are close to the financials. We are also, leveraging or analyzing a lot of data. So we can definitely help the different functions try to kind of come up with this North Star metric. The second step that happens during the development phase is to build a detailed financial model. I mean, that's our job, and that usually starts happening during the development phase of during the development phase of this life cycle. And then the third one is, we spoke about this on on the business case slide as well, which is to make sure that we are driving compliance to our budget. Sometimes what happens is, while when the different functions in the company are trying to take a concept and making it into a reality or turning it into a reality, uh, costs can escalate. And most often than not, we will see that the costs will start escalating beyond what we expected them to be, or beyond what we had explicitly planned for them to be. So here is where I think FP&A plays a really critical role in making sure that we're driving visibility into what those variances look like. And we are also driving risk mitigation activities, or we are owning the risk mitigation activities in partnership with our business partners to make sure that we are as compliant to the budget as possible. So that's the development phase. Now, when we talk about when this product is ready, when it has been built, when it is time to ship it into the market, I think the role of FP&A changes slightly and kind of becomes a more of monitoring and measuring kind of a role, right? So we start tracking the different KPIs that we had defined and we had set in the second stage. We start doing performance analysis, right? And what I mean by performance variance analysis is, not everything is going to go exactly as you planned, right? From a KPI standpoint, you might have come up with a certain forecast saying, here is what I expect here is how I expect this metric to move once I launch this product into the market. And guess what? It almost always will happen that your actuals won't actually come close or come very close to your forecasted numbers or your target numbers. So we start the FP&A team does a lot of work actually diagnosing what exactly is driving the variance, and we take, based on the insights that we generate from the work, we communicate it back to the business partners, clearly outlining, here are the different drivers that are leading to the variances, right? And the last one, as you can imagine, is I'm calling it executive communication, but basically what this means is to make sure that we drive visibility into the performance, whether it be how are the KPIs doing, whether it be how are we doing against the financials, where it could be just making sure that we are creating the right set of reports, right set of dashboards, to make sure that we have a way to monitor and measure the performance of the business in an ongoing manner. So that's usually the kind of work that happens in the third stage, which is when the product is shipped into the market. And then the last stage, which is an ongoing stage, which is also what we call as the run the business stage, is some of the things, it kind of goes back to what typical the day-to-day duties are of an FP&A team, which is to making sure that we have standardized financial reporting. We are on top of creating reports, or we have a standardized and automated way in which our reports are being created and circulated and distributed with our business partners. The second role, which or the second bullet point on the slide here, is extremely critical, and that is now kind of connecting back to the first slide that we mentioned, which is how the role of FP&A has evolved. Our job now is not only to provide standardized financial reporting, but it's also to help identify growth opportunities. And yes, we are enablers of the business. Finance is considered to be an enabler of the business, not an executor of the business. But I think FP&A teams are more and more now kind of playing a strategic role, as we spoke about. So we are partnering with the business teams to actually help identify potential growth opportunities for this product that you launched, or for this program that you launched into the market. And then the last role, which again kind of is the bread and butter of what we do, is to make sure that we drive effective P&L management, right? So making sure that we are keeping a very close eye on how the P&L is looking like, whether we are on track with our top line, whether we are on track with our OPEX, whether how is our gross margin looking like, how is our cash flow looking like. So basically taking a really close look, on the of the P&L on an ongoing basis, and communicating the insights, or communicating your observations back to your business partners, to your finance leadership, to make sure that the performance of the product is in line with what we expected. So that is the way I typically think about the engagement model, the FP&A engagement model, when it comes to when it comes to launching a new product or a solution. Now let's talk about my experience or the case study that I was involved in. So we launched Adobe Express in December of 2021, right? And as you can imagine, we launched it in December 2021, so that's the market entry stage. But what happened prior to that, over the last maybe 1.5 year, is a lot of a lot of work that went in terms of setting the right KPIs, identifying the right North Star metric, building a lot of different kind of financial models. We built financial models which actually went down, which had a breakdown across different geographies. It had breakdown across different customer segments. It had breakdown at a platform level, whether it's a desktop offering, whether it's a mobile offering. So creating all of those financial scenarios and financial models uh, is something that we worked on prior to the market entry. It started with, as you can imagine by now, it started with creating a business case. So really trying to kind of understand, why is it important for Adobe to launch this offering, right? The why is the most important aspect, in the early stages of the product development. And here is where the FP&A team, this my team, basically worked very closely with the business strategy team. It worked very closely with the product team, with the marketing team, to really try to understand what is the existing market landscape, right? So what are some of the gaps that we see, where which we need to kind of fill, by launching or by introducing this new solution into the market. And when we talk about the gaps, we also, from an FP&A standpoint, we talk about, okay, let's assume for a second that we launch this particular product. How would it help us bridge that gap? How would it help us come ahead of the competition? How would it help us drive the right kind of a customer impact? So it's really understanding what your customer wants. It's really understanding the industry trends, or where what are some of the potential gaps that you see, and then really kind of trying to figure out how the solution that you're, or the offering that you're trying to introduce into the market, how is that going to kind of solve for the gaps, or drive the right kind of customer impact, and how is that going to help the overall company from a business strategy standpoint. As I mentioned, we built a lot of financial models. We had a lot of what if scenarios. Our what if scenarios actually included building a P&L scenario for 1 year, for 3 years, for 5 years, for 10 years, having different assumptions in there, trying to come up with different rationale behind why we're making those assumptions, working very closely with the different teams to try to come up with what is the expected trajectory of the business, if we were to kind of hit every single milestone in terms of launching the product. So what will happen in year one, what will happen in year two, what will happen in year three, and so on and so forth, right? And then what the reason, so there are multiple different reasons why these long-term plans or long-term forecasts are created while working on this kind of a problem. One is, it really helps drive accountability, right? Because once you have kind of created this, what I call as plan of record, it's very easy to always go back to it and see what are some of the things that you assumed or you thought would happen, and now that you're actually in the market, where are some of the variances coming from? So it always becomes a great fallback, plan of record that you can go back to. The second is, so it drives accountability. The second is, it also gives a little bit of an understanding to our finance leadership on what is the level of investment, or what is the level of top line growth that this product can generate over the next couple of years, right? That is why some of these long-term scenarios or long-term forecasts become really important. Um, a- as I mentioned, a lot of work went into defining KPIs, and let's talk a little bit about that. Typically, what you might have seen is FP&A teams create forecasts or create financial models that are purely focused on financial KPIs, right? Whether it be revenue, whether it be COGS, whether it be OPEX, whether it be headcount, and so on. But in this case, what my team and I spent a lot of time on was actually understanding the non-financial KPIs. And what I mean by non-financial KPIs is, we actually, in our financial model, we had a forecast for what the traffic is expected to be, right, for this particular product, because it's a digital product. So it is basically, we were expecting, customers would first land on our website, and then they would try out this product. So there was a component of traffic associated with it, with this particular solution. So we actually had forecasts, which predicted what the traffic could be over the next couple of months or the next couple of years, depending on And how did we come up with these projections? Is we had conversations with our business partners trying to understand what are the features that are going to be launched, at what point of time are these features going to be launched, working with them to kind of size the growth in traffic or the growth in some other metric based on these features that are going to be launched, and then kind of having a forecast for them in our financial model. So traffic was something that we had. We started looking at what are the number of users that would use our product on an ongoing basis, right? So in the digital world, it's called, or in the product world, it's called the monthly active users, right? So how many users are actually going to be using your product on a monthly basis? There is also something called as a weekly active user or a quarterly active users, but we kind of were looking at the monthly active user metric. Then, in addition to that, we were looking at some other engagement KPIs, like what is the repeat usage expected to be? How many people are actually going to come back and use the product in 7 days? How many people are actually going to come back and use the product in 14 days? What is your repeat rate going to look like? Then we started looking at some of the monetization KPIs like conversion rates. So, of all the people who are going to come in and use your product, how many of the customers are actually going to convert into buying the product or subscribing with your product, and what should that conversion rate look like? We started making assumptions around what that needs to be for this particular product to be termed a success. Then we also started looking at what are some of the assumptions that we should make around our customer retention, right? So as you can imagine, in the SaaS business, customer retention is a really, really, really important metric, because if you're always only acquiring customers but not able to retain them, then it's not going to be a positive financial equation, right? Your customer acquisition cost is going to be way higher than your lifetime value. So we started making assumptions around what that customer retention, is going to look like as well. And then this entire, I would say, model, and I'm just kind of highlighting some of the high level metrics, but our financial model probably had around 30 metrics in there which were non-financial, and all of them ultimately translated into, okay, what does all of this mean in terms of my annual recurring revenue, so ARR? So in the SaaS world, basically our top line is annual recurring revenue, which then gets converted into revenue. So the model that we built was based on some of these upstream metrics, and then we connected it down to our revenue or top line metrics and our OPEX metrics. So that is the process that we followed during the discovery and the development phase, I would say. When we launched the product, it was all about, as I said, tracking the KPIs, right? So on a weekly basis, we were actually monitoring what the performance of different metrics looked like, and we were actually coming up with a revised version of our financial model on almost a weekly basis. And the reason for that is, as you can imagine, when you launch a product which is so anticipated by the company and as well as the market, there are a lot of eyes and a lot of attention to how the product is performing, right? So it's very critical for the finance team to actually build standardized reporting or reporting mechanisms in place, or have them in place, to make sure that we are able to track the performance of the metrics on a regular basis, and also convert that into so what, because that's really important, right? You can't only say this is what happened or this is what we see. We have to convert that into actionable insights or recommendations that we can give our business partners in terms of what does this mean for us? How is this varying with what we thought our metrics would look like by this point in the post product launch phase? So we do still do a lot of tracking the KPIs and doing performance diagnostics. And then ultimately the last stage would be optimization. So we are constantly kind of engaged with the different functions in the organization to identify potential growth opportunities, right? It's an ongoing process. So it's almost like it's not a one and done. It's almost like we engage with the different teams to make sure that we are constantly quantifying the potential opportunity from new initiatives or new features that are going to be launched into the market, and then making trade-off decisions, right? Saying, okay, if we launch this feature, here is the benefit that we would see, maybe from a financial or from a non-financial perspective, but right for the business, versus some other feature. And then based on the customer, based on the impact that we would see across the either the financial or non-financial metrics, making recommendations back to the business partner saying, from an FP&A perspective, here is what we feel we should launch, or here is what we feel should be the next step. So this was the overall like kind of an FP&A engagement model that I see and I've kind of experienced myself over the last couple of years.